right, Guru Nation, we're gonna go deep and I'm trying to write an article on this, but there's been a lot coming out lately, like some of the ramifications from private equity's involvement in our industry, which I'm I'm neither for nor against. Like I'm relatively neutral with it. I've had discussions with private equity people, and there's definitely a big money grab happening. I mean, the incentives are to do that. The incentives are in any industry right now to buy established businesses, use technology to squeeze the margins and make it better and have a return on your capital. I mean, that's the name of the game in literally every industry, and clinical research is perfectly suited for it because the more inefficiencies an industry has, the more promising the technology looks, et cetera, et cetera. However, this is not new in our industry. This has been going on for quite some time. As I've discussed, as I've ranted about on LinkedIn, and I did a recent rant recently that got some attention. I know Brad on Note to File is gonna have the author of the New York Times article on his program who wrote the New York Times piece on, I think it was called like private equity and owning IRBs, which we've all known for a while. I mean, this first came on my radar like 5 years ago. It's like, well, there's three major IRBs and they are all private equity owned. And by the way, they all offer a multitude of services well beyond ethics oversight. So some of them do e-pro, some of them do study brokerage services, some of them own sites. I mean, you can just go on their websites and look at what they offer. It's no secret. And I've actually done a pod on that even a couple of years back. But it's interesting how it's becoming mainstream now. And I've thought about it a little bit, and this is why I'm going to write an article. But there seems to be, like, the playbook seems to be, and people like Ken Getz, who I've never met him, I've never talked to him, we're not even LinkedIn connections. I do respect him, though, because he's an authority in this space. He's an entrepreneur. He came in the industry. I did a 4-minute profile on my YouTube channel on him. He actually found inefficiencies. Him and Dennis Gillings, who founded Quintiles, which is now IQVIA. I've still have yet to do a profile on Gillings. I'm trying to profile really interesting people in our space and in biotech. I want to do Doudna. I'd love to get these guys on the podcast, but they wouldn't. Although, in fairness to Ken Getz, I haven't reached out to him yet. But I think my 4-minute piece on him was fair. There was not very much criticism. There were just questions being asked. But respect to him. He started Center Watch. He started CISCRP, which is the patient advocacy group they've helped millions of patients. Center Watch, I remember when I started in this industry, Center Watch helped me kind of understand, even though I make fun of it now, like they sold me a $400 book, which was basically GCP in between two covers. Center Watch did provide some transparency, albeit even though it was like a freemium model, there was like a free version, then there was a paid version. You would get study leads. Ken Getz started this. And Ken Getz, from everything I've read and seen and heard, he's a stand-up dude, right? He might be a little bit like reserved other than at the conferences speaks at, but he started the movement. Like he kind of pointed people's compasses towards this direction. And the people that emulated him, so Ken Getz, respect to him, I don't think he's a grifter. But the people that emulated him, some of them are. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I'm not naming names, but you know them when you run into them. And it's no secret. Like, I'm not a fan of some of these people, some of these organizations. I'm not going to name names. You guys probably know some as well that I don't. There seems to be this closed loop of like this is the playbook. Ken Getz kind of started it, I think, on accident, and ultimately Ken Getz provides way more value than you can criticize of, whatever questions or ethical concerns you may have of the business models that he kind of, I think, organically created. I mean, in fairness to him, you can say the same thing about me, like, and I'll get to that, but I think he definitely provides a lot of value for the industry. But he created this blueprint, and the playbook is you diagnose, you commercialize, and then you narrate. And this is a seamless reinforcing value chain. So the diagnosis really has to happen from think tanks or from academic research centers. And this is where Ken gets with Tufts. This is where he excels, and he's written hundreds, if not thousands, of papers and published data on these topics, which I think are ultimately helpful because there's a need for that, right? It's good to point to something and say, well, somebody did the research and these are the problems in our space. Now, what we're doing to fix those problems is part of the playbook. So you have to have a think tank or some kind of academic centric organization that defines the industry's problem and then creates market demand. And then there's the commercialization play. So this is where the for-profit ventures come in. And now this includes the industry's ethical watchdogs, which are the IRBs. They are commercial for-profit ventures, private equity owned. This is the ones that sell the solutions that were diagnosed. And then there's a narration afterwards where advocacy groups provide some kind of a patient-centric facade, or maybe now it's going to be a site-centric facade. Who knows? Ensuring that the public trust or the goodwill remains intact. Now, it doesn't mean the narrative is false. It doesn't mean necessarily that they're virtue signaling. Again, this is not a shot at Ken Getz. I think he organically stumbled upon this opportunity and kind of ran with it. But he inadvertently created this blueprint that now everyone's trying to emulate. And so you're seeing a lot of these mini me's pop up where they try to do the same thing, but they are actually grifters. Like Ken Getz provides value. These ones don't really provide value. And you guys can put in the comments if you want to name names. I'm not getting in trouble. In a way, the new generation, I'm not comparing myself to Ken Getz at all as far as influence, but I was the first one to start making content for research on YouTube. And then this is why I kind of can see where Ken Getz kind of organically fell into this blueprint. I don't think it was a master plan of his when he started out. It wasn't one of mine either. I created content. It wasn't really to diagnose problems necessarily. It was more to help my former self figure out things, right? Like, what's a 1572? What's a consent form? How do I find a PI? And then it just started evolving and it became like this self-reinforcing loop. But then people started asking me questions. Hey, well, do you mentor people that are trying to get in to be CRAs? No. I kept saying no, 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 until there was enough of a demand to where I was like, okay, why don't we start? So I talked to some homies of mine and we started CRA Academy and then CRC Academy. And I think the days of the academies are kind of on their last breath, but the academy came up. And then same thing with people that wanted to start sites or people that needed help with their sites. Hey, do you offer consulting? Do you? No, no, we don't. Until we finally did, right? I didn't have the narrative part, like the virtue signaling aspect. I mean, I guess if I had some critics, they would say Latinos in clinical research is like my virtue signaling shield. It's really not what it was meant to be. That was inspired by Danielle Mitchell with Black Women in Clinical Research. And I literally asked her while she was on my podcast, this is such a good idea. It was during COVID. Do you mind if we do this with Latinos? Because I know like 4 or 5 Latino that I know we talk about this stuff all the time. I know the industry can use this as well. And she's like, yeah, go for it. And so we started doing that. But I mean, I can have critics that say, oh, well, you're just kind of doing the same thing as these people you're criticizing that diagnose, commercialize, and narrate, although it's slightly different. And I don't know what that playbook would actually be. Maybe it would be like authenticity and then commercialize, and then I don't know what the narration part would be. Maybe making memes. I don't know. That doesn't make money at the scale of like this actual playbook where the PEs are now owning IRBs, they're owning sites, they're owning the tech, and there's serious concerns with that. Like, I think IRBs should just do IRBs. Now, just do the ethics oversight. However, I'm a free market capitalist as well. And so they're not breaking any rules. So far, there haven't been any real issues that I'm aware of. I know from some, the culture at these places is not the best, but that's besides the point. So I do see a world where this does get out of control, though, because you start getting grifters. You're going to start getting people that are not in it for the reasons Ken Getz, I would assume, got in it for, or the reason I got in it for. Like even my model can be replicated by somebody else. Like there's been other people after me doing YouTube, and some of them were trying to grift. Like, hey, buy my course, and then their course would just be a total rip off of something. And like people can point to me and say, well, you started that blueprint. I think we just kind of show the blueprint, like because we did it accidentally. And so Ken Getz kind of started this blueprint for the diagnose, commercialize, and narrate. And that's basically the three pillars of this. It's like what's the problem? Craft the problem. Before COVID, it was risk-based monitoring, right? And supposedly risk-based monitoring saved billions of dollars. During COVID, it was remote, virtual, decentralized trials, which, mm, I mean, there's elements of it that still work. Currently, it's all about AI and PE now. And then the more PE you're getting into this space, like the bigger they get, the more they're all going to want to control the narrative as well. And if you are connected with academia, you are pretty close to politicians and regulatory capabilities. Now, how close do we want PE to get to that? Because they're already close. They're already making policy. Now, is the real question we all got to ask as an industry, whether you agree with this model or not, is irrelevant. Are things getting better in our industry? Are trials more accessible? I don't know the answer to that. I want to say it's not much different from when I started 20 years ago. Is there more diversity in the industry? I actually would say yes. That is a win. Anecdotally, I remember monitors all being white. Like when I started, it was rare to see a non-white monitor. Now I see all different backgrounds. So I think we have a win there on the diversity front. Do we have a win on the diversity front as far as patient recruitment? I don't think so. I think you need more sites in the communities where those patients live, like Yuma, Arizona, like McAllen, Texas, like Memphis, Tennessee. Like you need more sites in these places. That requires the industry, meaning pharma, to take a chance on unproven principal investigators. There are some sponsors are trying harder. I'll give them that. I don't know if it's a narrative that they're trying to push out or if they actually care. I know I met with members from different sponsor companies that I can tell you I would put my money on it. These people actually care. So I think the industry has made small incremental improvements, but at what cost now is the other question. Because now prior to Trump. Who knows what Trump's going to do with most favored nation? Let's see how that plays out with drug prices. Take that aside because that's the ultimate wild card. The cost of trials are exponentially going higher. When Ken Getz first got started, I think the cost to get a drug to approval was like 57 million or something crazy. Something crazy low. Today it's $3 billion. 3 billion with a B to get a drug approved. So now his skeptics say, well, they're using these studies that they published to justify the higher cost of drugs because the sponsors are basically funding some of his organizations. Fair, but it's not proven, and you have to look at what they've actually done. And this is why I credit Ken Getz. He's actually created more value, I think, than even the critics can point and point blame. But not the same cannot be said for the other ones emulating that blueprint. And then maybe, again, I'm not a Ken Getz on his level. I have a different paradigm. It's like a different generation. I'm millennial. I think he's baby boomer. But the blueprint that I created, I've already seen with my own eyes other people that are grifting that model. There's even people faking that they're site owners to get consulting work for sites. Like it's crazy. As long as like I know Ken provided more value than you can point fingers at. I hope I'll do the same. But that's not the same can't be said for everyone that follows in those footsteps. And what we're seeing in this industry right now, and the New York Times is picking it up, is there's some grifting going on, and there's a lot of commercialization, but then there's the narration and the narrative and the manufacturing the trust, while at the same time the trust is eroding. And the New York Times is talking about the trust from the patient's perspective. So this is something to think about. I'm going to write an article on this because I think it's an important topic. And I want to know what your thoughts on this are. Maybe we'll do a part two. Maybe Ken Getz wants to come on. I'd be honored. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Catch you guys later. I want to know your thoughts. Bye bye.